set up here in front of the Christmas tree, I feel a little bit like Her Majesty the Queen, ready to deliver her Christmas or New Year's message. But I'm not. It's just me, Trudy. And I thought it was time to do another video blog. And what I really wanted to talk about was writing, and the fact that a number of people have told me, correctly of course, that I've had a really good year for writing this year. And it is really true, because I had 4 books released this year, and by any standards, that's a good year. But I always start second-guessing myself as soon as anyone says that. The thing with writing is it's a delicate balance, and I guess the same would be true for any independent artist who is trying to promote themselves. You have to walk that fine line between promoting yourself enough that your name and the names of your books or whatever your work is always out there, but at the same time not enough that people get sick to death of it. And particularly this is difficult as a writer with writer friends, because we all go through periods where we're not successful or we're struggling to be successful. And if you have a good year, and say you do have 4 books come out in 1 year, on the one hand you want to celebrate that fact and of course keep it in the public eye, and at the same time you don't really want to upset and annoy your other writer friends who are like, would you please stop talking about the 4 books you had out this year while I'm still trying to get my manuscript published. I know, because I've been on the other side of that, and yes, it is annoying, but at the same time you can't stop talking about it. The other funny thing that happens is that I find myself finding ways to undercut any success I do have. And as soon as something is successful or is published or released, I start thinking, well, that doesn't really count. You know, By the Rivers of Brooklyn, yes, it's the major historical novel I was working on for years, and it was released, but, you know, it's only been released by a local publisher, and while it's selling well here in Newfoundland, you know, people outside of Newfoundland haven't really heard of it. It's not, you know, it's not available in stores all across Canada, certainly not in the U.S. So while it's done well, it's only a regional publisher. And then, of course, my other books are only out with an inspirational publisher, and they don't have really wide distribution. So I start thinking, well, maybe they don't really count. And then whenever anybody says I've had a really successful year and it's amazing that I've had 4 books out, I always say, well, yes, but that doesn't mean I wrote 4 books in a year. By the Rivers of Brooklyn took years to get published. Daughters of Grace, well, I feel like I didn't really write that one. I mean, I did, but it was a collection of magazine articles that I'd written over a period of a couple of years that were collected into a book, so I didn't have to sit down and write the manuscript. And then I think, well, Esther, the young adult novel about Queen Esther, that doesn't really count because it was just an adaptation for younger readers of a longer novel that I'd already written and published. And then the book that came out at the end of the year, Joseph's Story, well, that doesn't really count because it's only a novella, so, you know, only 30,000 words, so that doesn't count either. And I realized that the reason I do this, and I think a lot of writers do, is because there's always some holy grail that's out there somewhere of further success that you're chasing. So first it's getting your work published, and then when your work is published, you want good reviews, and then when you have good reviews, you want a wider market and a wider readership. And here's the secret, it's never enough. At least for me, it's never enough. Any success I achieve, I always want more. And I don't think this was because my parents didn't love me enough as a child or whatever, because they did and they do. I think it's just that for most writers, the need for external affirmation and acceptance is a yawning chasm that can never be filled. And if you have critical acclaim, you want better sales. And if you have good sales, you want critical acclaim. And if you have a book published, you want it published in a wider market. And as long as you're waiting for that holy grail of external affirmation, you will never get enough. At least I won't. I was talking about this with a writer friend the other day, and I said, what would be the ultimate? In 1 year, I would have a book out that would win the Governor General's Award and the Giller Prize in the same year, and be #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 months. And you know what would happen? I would be happy. I would feel fulfilled. I would feel affirmed by the universe for about 10 minutes. And then I would say, why don't I have better sales overseas? Why am I not popular in Europe? Why am I not huge in Japan? It's never enough. And somehow you have to learn to have the affirmation inside you. And I guess there are writers who have that from the beginning and are happy just to tell their stories and have people read them. But for me, that's a constant struggle and something I have to work towards. So maybe for 2009, I'll be happy with what I've accomplished. And for 2010, I'll work a little bit more on being content with what I have and always striving to do better, but not always chasing after the Holy Grail. Do you see what I did here? You notice that? That somehow I managed to get all 4 of my books up pointing at the camera so you could look at them and think, oh, there's one of Trudy's books I haven't read. Maybe I should buy that. See? The self-promotion never stops. To those of you who have read or bought my books in 2009, thanks so much, really. No matter what Holy Grail is out there, the real affirmation I know in my heart is having somebody else read a book and love it and say, wow, I really enjoyed that book. Thanks so much.